Hey everyone, it's Jackie, and today we're joined by Dr. Amy Albright, a force in human evolution and peak performance. She's redefining what's possible by fusing neuroscience, strategy, and spirituality to unlock the next level of human potential. Get ready to think bigger. Dr. Amy Albright up next. So, Dr. Amy, welcome to Different Facets of Happiness. How are you?
Thank you. I'm having a fabulous day.
Oh,
Thank you.
wonderful. So, my first question to you is what first awakened your curiosity about the connection between science, consciousness, and healing?
It's a great question. I was 18 and studying at University of California at Irvine, and I was an atheist, and I was studying neurosciences. I know it's like plot twist. How did somebody that's devoted her life to a spiritual path start as an atheist? Well,
Yes.
I had a little bit of religious influence in my upbringing, but really didn't have an anchor there, and it didn't really resonate for me, honestly, the traditional kind of like religious pathways. So I think due to that, and also that I'd had a lot of trauma, and I'm very practical. I'm very grounded as just a being, like on a soul level. This is an isness of me. So I thought, if we understand neurosciences, if we understand neurochemicals and neurosciences, we can understand the fabric of the human experience. And so these are the kind of thoughts I was thinking at 18 when I was enrolled in a really rigorous academic study
Yeah.
of, neuroanatomy, neurophysiology, neuropathology, and all of that. And I was preparing potentially to go forward and do laboratory experiments on rats. I mean, it was that level of academic rigor.
Yeah.
But I was also like, I hadn't ever, held a rat in my hand, A, or B, ever hurt an animal. Like, so I didn't know if I could actually do that. But that was my starting place. And then at age 18, I was sent by my grandpa, who was a studier of consciousness and transcendental meditation at that point for decades, whom I didn't really know because my father and he were estranged, right? So that created an estrangement with him. So he sent me to acupuncture and he said, also, you've got to come around because I have things to teach you, which turns out later I found out was consciousness. But my very first time at acupuncture, I know nothing about Chinese medicine. I know nothing about energy. None of this even fits my paradigm. But I had been so sick. He said, I really want you to go. And I'd been sick my entire life. Like, I never knew what it was like to be well at 18, for sure, with
Mhm.
all kinds of different health problems. So my very first day on the acupuncture table, the guy put in the needles and he walks out, and I start to have a feeling of that I'm levitating and that I'm sinking and I'm hearing voices and I'm tracing and understanding energy. And I feel very, very distinct things throughout my entire body. And it was such an experience. It's trying to translate this is kind of like trying to tell somebody what it's like to give birth to a baby, or like there are these life moments that you just can't know unless you know. And I basically had this profound God moment as an atheist. And it was like, oh, wow, there must be a God. There's got to be a higher power was the first aha. And then the second one is science will never be able to explain all of this.
Mm.
Like
Mm.
there is too much here.
Yeah, that's so empowering. Like,
Mhm.
honestly, that's wonderful. That wonderful feeling. Just hearing your story, that I can see how that changed your life immensely.
Immensely. I call it my Big Bang moment. It's like
Yes.
the moment that my own personal universe of understanding was born. And so I carried with me the desire to understand all of those neurosciences and to be able to, I continued on my academic rigors. I shifted out of the one where I would have to dissect rats. And I went into the one where we would do human studies and understand the brain via behavior and how things like vision and memory and all of that worked. So it was still a very intense academic course. But what happened was that I basically brought in an unofficial minor in anthropology. And what that did was I through the lens of anthropology, I started to study what has it been to be human throughout time, including studies of shamanism. I had a whole semester or a quarter that I studied shamanism in an academic setting. I studied indigenous rites of passage and ways of healing around the world. I studied Native American dance. So I did quite a lot at that point to weave those things together, in addition to showing up for those informal classes that my grandpa was referring to.
Yeah.
And he would sit me down and talk to me about the most vast constructs of consciousness. And I honestly, at that time, my eyes would roll back in my head. it was interesting, but it was, like, beyond the frame of what I could really hold,
Yeah, yeah.
and then I would say, "Grandpa, can I take notes?" He's like, "No, I'm gonna say it to you once, and you put it in your bones. There's no taking notes." He was a tough he was a tough teacher.
I like that. I'm gonna use that line. I'm gonna put it in your Well, you've spoken about integrating both data and intuition. How did you learn to trust both equally in your work?
It's a great question. So I went through my academic undergrad and then I thought I was going to be a researching professor. And then I realized I couldn't study the same thing the rest of my life. I realized how constrained that would make me. So I went on a vision quest, didn't get an answer on what to do next, but I took a one-way trip by myself to a foreign country and really dove in. So to come around to the point, I basically felt absolutely instructed by the divine. I had a very clear, tangible voice that said I had to go to acupuncture, Chinese medicine school,
Yeah.
and that anything else would be wasting my time. So, at this point, that's another 4 years of school. I've had a very rigorous academic undergrad preparing for a PhD program, and then I end up in a doctoral or what was essentially preparing me to be a primary care provider here in the state of California, right? So it wasn't, to come to your question, it wasn't that I trusted my sense of knowingness and science in the same kind of ways and really wove them together until I got into my first months of practice.
Ah, okay, okay.
When you have a stranger come in, and I didn't realize how much capacity I had in this regard. I could have a stranger come in and they would start to tell me about what was going on and what they wanted help with, and I would just be getting so much more information. The mind body aspect of why that body thing was happening, but also just downloads on
And that was all
everything.
through intuition is
Yes.
yes, yeah, okay.
And it's like, wait a minute, fact check. If I thought that I somehow was just, I don't know, piecing together a puzzle, if it's a complete stranger and all I have is what's on their intake form, then what I know about this patient right now
Yeah.
is something beyond that. But I feel like that the science and I've also have like kind of a hardcore skeptic. And so there was a skeptic of me about me, if that makes sense. Not necessarily what was possible, but that I could be doing
Yeah.
that I could know things from the unseen or, these intuitive things like this. I didn't have that frame necessarily for myself, even though I'd had some pretty dramatic instances of laying on hands and healing. And, like I said, I received a calling to know to go to Chinese medicine school, but I didn't know how to internalize that and make it be something that I thought of about myself, possible for myself. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about more about consciousness and the brain for a moment, if you don't mind. Because you had some studies that revealed that unique brain activity during intuitive or meditative states. You've had that done before in the past. What do you think is actually happening neurologically and in those moments? If you can just elaborate on that for us.
Yeah, I mean, the scope of what might be happening when somebody's in meditation or receiving intuitive downloads, so to speak, or being really tapped in is really broad and it'll depend, right? Like, so if we see what it looks like, and by the way, I've learned the majority of this via working with my colleague, Dr. Drew Pearson. So I want to be sure to credit him here in this because he is definitely my teacher in this. All doctors go through medical school understanding very little about the brain, which is
Yes.
interesting because it's the motherboard of all of the things.
Yeah.
But it's intimidating even for academics. So to go back to the question, if there's somebody that is channeling angels, we might see an uptick of gamma waves in their auditory cortex. Very, very, very high frequency, which makes sense when we tune into what we feel and know of the angelic realm. Very high frequency.
Yeah.
But it's not just gamma waves anywhere, and it's not gamma waves unorganized, and it's very beautiful uptick of gamma waves in that auditory cortex. So that's a for instance. If somebody's in a deep meditative state, we're going to see really beautiful peaks of alpha waves, really organized, coming from kind of the back of the top of the head towards the front of the top of the head. So they move in a direction and they're organized. Anytime we have chaos inside of the brain, if something is not organized, we're not able to access those intuitive or even just like higher level of reason kind of states. The brain requires massive amounts of organization, not just at the wave level, but all the way through the structures and all of the communication hubs. So, we also see a lot of the intuitive capacities coming from the right parietal area. And that's a lot of the times when people are, it doesn't necessarily indicate this. There might be also a visual cortex aspect, but a lot of the times they're clairvoyant or they're channels or things like that. And then we also see, like, if people are really good at doing distance healing
Yes.
or even in person healing, the construct that many of us are familiar with of theta healing, a lot of people who are trained in theta healing are actually not using theta waves in their brain. Because just because you learn, if you listen to, let's say, a theta binaural beats, 30% of brains will actually go into an increase of theta waves. The other 70% is just nice music. It might be doing something. I'm not saying it's not helping them,
Yeah.
but it's not necessarily putting them where they think that they are based on the name. Right?
Ah,
So with people who are really genuinely inside of a theta state, they can have a huge capacity of theta, and that'll be organized and in a certain place. Because if it's disorganized or in the wrong place, that leads to kind of like ADHD symptoms where
right.
they feel like they can't function, but if it's happening at the right place and in the right way, it's a huge healing capacity. So this is just a few, like a sampling as an overview. Any state of consciousness that we have ever achieved is mappable and understandable inside of the brain via an electrical level. That's really what we study, is the electrical, and work with the electrical. And likewise, any healing state that's ever occurred, there's going to be something that's happening neurologically that shows that, like a profound, where people are talking about those God moments, or
Right.
they receive Reiki or whatever it is,
Right.
that is going to show in their brain.
So you mentioned the consciousness. How do you define a higher consciousness?
A higher consciousness within the individual, or
Yes.
I guess
Yes.
okay.
Yes.
Yeah, and I mean, that is, so with the brain work that we do, we really are focused on elevating a state of consciousness, and I could say that that is the awareness that no matter where, there's a lot of ways. Wait, let me back up first. A
Okay.
first description of consciousness is that I'm not gonna be able to describe it with words. I'll do my best, I can point at it. In the Taoist religion, they say the true Tao cannot be named, right? Anything that is named is not the true Tao. It's like understanding the word infinite, or understanding the circumference of the sun or how hot it is. We
Right.
can see the number. We
But
can agree on a definition. But I mean, really, what does that mean? However many millions of miles, or, like, ever kilowatts of power, or whatever all those things, I forgot what they're called, kilojoules or something like that. We don't really know. So within consciousness, I would say it's a lot about awareness. And it's the awareness of oneself a more refined level, but also the awareness of self as it's interconnected to all, right? When we get up into higher states of consciousness, the experience of oneness isn't just a thought construct, but it is an embodied reality where the blending of the lines of your energy field and the sense of causality start to fade away. And things are not as black and white, but rather a transcendent reality, or a transcendent understanding of causality and
that
awareness.
that almost takes us into the unknown in a bit. So how do you maintain that balance between evidence and the unknown?
Mm. Personally, I trust what my gut is over a lot. So I go there first, but I'm always double checking, and it's always secretly, or silently, I should say, founded inside of science. So if I'm going to make a recommendation for a client or a patient, I'm not going to just, like, randomly, put things together. Here's some supplements, or here's some things to do that have no basis. But what I am going to do is reference this entire catalog of all of this very academic and practice based education that I've learned along my lifetime as a clinician, and then apply it based on my intuition, right?
Yeah.
And it's always inside of that space of do no harm. And if I'm talking about, if it's not about a client, it's like, is this grounded? Is this practical? Will I do harm there? Right. And if there's not a risk, or the risk is something that I'm willing to take, then I'm going to just go ahead and move forward with what it is that came to me Gnostically in that way. Yeah.
So you mentioned your practice. Let's talk about your practice for a second, your programs that you have. So can you share the vision behind the Holon experience that you have? What inspired it, and what transformation do you hope participants will walk away with?
Yeah, so with our signature experience, that is the most advanced neurotechnology, software and hardware, being applied for real time brain learning so that people's brains can come into this incredible symphony We're already a symphony, but maybe some of the violins aren't playing on the right keys in there. There's some things that are going on. And also, we may not be strong in all the ways that we want, we may not be resilient in all those ways. So basically, the vision and the origin of that is that my colleague, who is the neuroscientist of the team, even though I studied it a lot, I don't consider myself to be a neuroscientist. We bring people through a program that's in an intensive format. So it's over 40 hours inside of 5 days. And it's as much neurofeedback therapy, which is a real-time brain learning for them, as their brains can possibly handle.
Yeah.
And the reason that we've learned to do it that way is that in the beginning, people would come to me for my aspect is a lot about that spiritual guidance, a lot about seeing them down into that soul level, and a lot about creating those shifts on an energetic, emotional, and mental level so that they can reframe their reality and live a different life. So people would come to me and then they would come to him, and we had a regular clinical practice, and we would each see people once a week. But what we learned is that you pull people out of their normal environment, and now they become more malleable because they aren't pretending that they know what reality is, and they're not pretending that they can just go home and be the same person they've been. So it's a very loving environment that we have created, and we get radical change that is verified
I was
by
gonna ask you
EEG.
about that. I was gonna
Yeah.
ask, like, these people that walk into this program, what are they left with? What did they walk out with?
All of them, regardless of what they came in wishing for, say, I am less reactive, I am more resilient, I am more peaceful, I have a broader capacity to connect with myself and the people and nature and the world around me. And so, even if they've come in for, let's say, sleep problems, they want to do a better job as a CEO of their company, I mean, we'll often have people come in with those kinds of things and then say, "And I'd also like to hone my intuition and be a medical intuitive or a clairvoyant," right? So we'll bring them through the part of their life where they feel like they're having problems, right? The sleep problems, they're reactive or whatever their things are, right? They're always worrying, they're self-conscious, whatever all those things are. And we bring them through that arc to where they're not only not those things anymore, but they're able to stretch into their potentials. And we can see those potentials. I can see them energetically, I can feel them, and my colleague can see them neurologically. And so we put that together with what the client wants to create these incredible programs and outcomes.
So your program uses the term evolutionary intelligence. How do you define that, and how do people access it?
Yeah, I mean, evolutionary intelligence is how do we actually learn how the evolution works, right? So rather than thinking incremental, we always want to think as strategic and big picture as possible, taking chunks of our history and our learnings from the past and what we know about the environment and possibility and moving something faster, further, better, and with more ease. But I think the way that a lot of people have approached their evolution is by happenstance, hope it gets better, kind of avoid it, maybe numb it out a little bit, maybe hit a therapist here or there somewhere in the decades that's helped them with some things.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's not a great strategy. Like, most people that we work with would not be running their businesses like this. This is not how they're doing their estate and financial planning. This is not great strategy. So, how we would want to look at that is how to learn the art of transformation itself. And how do you position yourself inside of what you're currently experiencing and then understand what's possible and get there with ease. And so we have different tools and ways to do that. But ultimately, we want to empower people so that they're not dependent on us and that they can be just on fire, fully alive, like really feeling in charge of their lives all the time.
Yes. So many of your clients are leaders or innovators. What inner
Yes.
transformation separates great leaders from good ones?
I mean, that's a great question. I think that one of the most important ones is their ability to accurately understand what's going on in them and the people around them and be really serious about evolution. Like, the kind of languaging that I use with folks is like, are you willing to just basically set fire to everything that doesn't work? How deep is your yes?
And,
How
and,
deep is
and
your
what
yes?
is the answer to that question? Because are they ready to do that?
I mean, it depends. I don't always ask them that in the opening line because that could cause them their knees to shake. And but it's ultimately, I'm bringing them along on an arc that's like, look, nobody can do anything to your brain that you're a no to. Even if we have all the software, nobody can do any energetic science that you are a no to. And your yes might be at the level of the mind, but your no might be at the level of your sense of safety, or there's some inner child that's freaking out or whatever. How
Yes.
do we get all of you lined up for this change? Because then the change is easy and we expect miracles. Expect them, not like maybe they happen. We expect them,
It's
right?
true. So true. So do you believe organizations themselves, not just individuals, can evolve into consciousness?
Yeah, totally. Totally. And that taps in on a lot of the other work that I do. So I was describing the brain work, and I do a lot of work in that direction with my colleague. But I also have been an executive coach and strategic advisor for a couple of decades now, and have done a lot of work inside of organizations behind the scenes, maybe just with one or a handful of the leaders on an executive team. But I also have done it in a more front facing way in helping them to drive culture and make some really huge changes, whether that's changing out some of the team that are toxic, whether that's changing out how we communicate and what the expectations are. So I love working out into business. It feels very natural for me. And again, I get there gnostically,
Yeah.
and I look at, essentially leaders need, and to go back to your prior question, leaders need to be held accountable. If there is darkness inside of their organization, if there is dysfunction inside of their organization, there is something to look at inside of them. And I'm not saying they're bad people, but they may have the thermostat for toxicity set wrong because of the way their parents raised them, right? They grew up in dysfunction. That's kind of all they know. And so here we are, and we're going to create that, or we're going to create like, hey, doesn't everybody run a business this way? Or this is where this is doing business, this is profitability. And it's like, actually, we retain our teams, and people will yield so much more if we bring consciousness, if we bring awareness, if we lead with love, if we lead with, and it doesn't mean lead with softness, it means lead with love, right?
Yeah.
Like, where do we dial up the tough love and the clear expectations and the higher benchmarks? But where do we also be really real with people? Because they're not actually robots. And if that's what business is, we're set to fail, right? Because these are things that are being run by people, at least at this point. All the stuff I'm talking about is the people part of it.
Yeah. And the world is changing how we
It
operate.
is.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
So if you could see the Holon Experience now grow globally, what impact
Mhm.
do you want most to see? Want to see the most in the next decade?
I mean, for the brain intensive that I was describing at that level, we only will see it at maximum of 30 liters per year. It is a it would take so much investment on our end, and we don't wish to scale it. So what I am doing is creating more programs for people to be able to learn the strategy and the methodology. We have myself and another coach on the team that can help to implement, because there's actually quite a lot of scientifically backed things that people can do from home that get them huge results. And we've studied in our own labs because we don't necessarily believe what all the makers of these products say about themselves. We actually vet them very deeply, and we've created these programs. We can create a custom program for anybody. So I think that a lot of it is just this bigger message that I want to see scaled. If I were to look at the 10-year arc, that we're able to drive our own reality, that we can achieve, to use the word of this podcast, happiness, true happiness through and through, not BS. Don't paint a coat of happy over on top of a big pile of you know what. Like, we actually can be genuinely happy, alive, awake, on fire. And we just have to have really good tools and resources to get there. I think the majority of what's out there kind of implies an incremental, maybe you can be slightly better model. And I think that if we go on a slightly better model, we're probably never going to get to where we really want to be. We're just going to get marginally better. So
Absolutely.
really what's possible, I want people that's my biggest vision and mission, is to make sure even people that will never be able to set foot inside of our programs, or it's not the right thing for them or whatever, to be able to spread that message of hope and passion, and for people to understand what is really possible, and that what's possible is continuing to expand as we move forward with technology and working together. It's just going to keep growing.
It is. It really, really is. Dr. Amy Albright, thank you so much. Where can people reach you and your team?
Yeah, for information on a lot of the brain work, you can go to holonexperience.com, HOLON experience.com. You can also check out my YouTube channel, which is Dr. Amy Albright. Those are probably the two best places to have a look.
Awesome. Thank you. I know they will be checking you out for sure. Thank you
Thanks,
so much.
you. It's been a pleasure, Jackie. Thanks for having me on.
With you. Thank you so much. I hope you were able to take something special from that show because Dr. Amy reminds us that power and purpose aren't opposites, they're partners. And when we align with who we are, transformation isn't just possible, it's inevitable. I'm Jackie Denise. Thanks for watching, subscribing, be well, and take care.